What would you do if you were punched and thrown out of a car dealership for no reason? Most people would be furious, but when this happened to Keanu Reeves, his response was nothing short of legendary. Instead of anger, he did something that left everyone in shock. Why was he kicked out? How did he react? And what happened next that no one saw coming? This story is proof that true character shines even in the toughest moments. You won't believe the twist at the end. It was a crisp, sunlit morning in Los Angeles, the kind where the sky stretched endlessly like a canvas painted with possibility. Keanu Reeves, dressed in a black leather jacket and worn jeans, walked through the streets with his usual quiet presence. He blended effortlessly into the morning crowd, moving with an air of calm detachment. A few people recognized him, their eyes lighting up with admiration, but he never made a spectacle of himself. A simple nod, a polite wave, a quiet thank you in response to a whispered compliment. Keanu had always been that way. Fame had never altered his essence, never made him feel superior to those around him. It was this humility that made him different, that set him apart in a world where wealth and status often dictated behavior. Today would be no different, or so he thought. Midway through his walk, he stopped at a small cafe, one he had been visiting for years. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee wrapped around him like an old friend. Behind the counter, Olio, the longtime barista, greeted him with a genuine smile. "Good morning, Olio. How are things?" Keanu asked, his voice warm. "Going well, Keanu." "The usual," the barista responded. "The usual, please," Keanu confirmed with a slight nod. As he waited for his coffee, his mind wandered, settling on something he had been searching for over the past few months. It wasn't just a passing thought, but a quiet pursuit, something rare, something with a story, a soul. He loved classic cars, but this wasn't just about adding to a collection. He wanted something special, something he could restore and use for a meaningful purpose. Maybe a tribute, maybe a donation for a good cause. He wasn't entirely sure yet, but he knew that when he found the right car, he would feel it. With his coffee in hand, Keanu continued his walk, his destination already in mind. There was a dealership known for housing some of the rarest and most exclusive cars in the world. If his car was anywhere, it would be there. The thought filled him with quiet anticipation as he stepped through the gleaming glass doors. The atmosphere inside dripped with wealth and exclusivity, a stark contrast to the modest cafe he had just left. The floor was polished to perfection, reflecting the sleek, flawless finishes of multi-million-dollar cars. The air carried the unmistakable scent of new leather, a scent that spoke of luxury. Customers in tailored suits and designer accessories moved effortlessly through the showroom, their presence oozing privilege. Keanu, in his simple attire, barely earned a glance. Almost. A few eyes flickered toward him, their curiosity quickly turning into quiet whispers. Some recognized him, while others simply saw a man in worn jeans and a leather jacket, someone who at first glance didn't belong there. But Keanu wasn't here to impress anyone. His focus was solely on a car at the back of the showroom. It sat in quiet elegance, its curved lines and impeccable craftsmanship setting it apart from the modern vehicles surrounding it. There was a timeless beauty to it, a presence that felt almost magnetic. His heart quickened as he realized this was it. With quiet determination, Keanu approached the salesman standing near the front desk. The man, distracted by his phone, barely acknowledged Keanu's presence. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his voice calm yet firm. "Could you tell me more about this model?" The salesman didn't even bother to look up fully. With a dismissive glance, he waved a hand, still focused on his screen. "Hang on. I'll get someone." Then, without another word, he walked away, never once looking back. Keanu watched him leave, his expression neutral, but something in his face shifted ever so slightly. The smallest furrow of his brow, barely noticeable, hinted at his thoughts. He had spent a lifetime mastering patience, but even he wasn't immune to the feeling of being so casually dismissed. Still, he stayed put, his attention returning to the car that had captivated him. Yet, as he stood there, the atmosphere around him began to change. It wasn't outright hostility, but a silent, growing tension. The stares. The whispers. The quiet judgment. He could feel them circling around him like an invisible force. Does he even know where he is? One employee muttered under his breath. Doesn't look like he's buying anything here. Another smirked. Keanu heard them, every word, but chose not to react. He had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than confrontation. Then, he noticed someone approaching him, a man with a rigid posture and a gaze sharp with appraisal. It was Henry, the manager, and he carried himself with an air of quiet authority. Every step he took seemed to thicken the tension in the room, as if the weight of judgment grew heavier with each movement. Stopping in front of Keanu, Henry glanced at the car, then at the man studying it. His smile was thin, more of a test than a greeting. "This model is exclusive. Very rare," he said, his voice carefully measured. Keanu held his gaze unshaken. "That's exactly what I'm looking for," he responded, his tone unwavering. Henry's eyes flickered with something unreadable, scanning Keanu from head to toe. There was a pause, small but telling. Then, with a smirk, Henry folded his arms, his next words laced with subtle condescension. "Well, I hope you're ready. This car isn't for just anyone." Keanu didn't flinch. He simply smiled small, almost imperceptible, but undeniably confident. Henry took a step back, studying him once more, clearly expecting hesitation. But Keanu's eyes didn't waver. What no one in that showroom knew was that the man standing before them was far more than just anyone. A few minutes later, the manager finally appeared. Henry, a man with a rigid posture and a sharp gaze, walked toward Keanu with firm, deliberate steps. Every movement felt calculated, as though he was asserting his authority with every step. Stopping a few paces away, he crossed his arms and flashed a thin, almost mocking smile. "Interested in this model?" Henry asked, his tone carrying an edge of condescension. Keanu remained composed, nodding slightly. "Yes, it's an impressive car. I'd like to know more about it," he replied, his voice calm but unwavering. Henry's gaze flickered over Keanu's faded jeans and worn leather jacket, lingering just a second too long. Raising an eyebrow, Henry seemed amused by the audacity of this man to walk into his showroom dressed like that. "Interesting," he murmured, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "This is one of our most exclusive models. Very few people even get to see one, let alone it." The words hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in arrogance. Keanu stood firm, unfazed by the man's attempt to intimidate him. But the tension in the room was already growing thicker, and it was impossible to ignore the weight of the unspoken judgment surrounding him. Henry took a small step to the side, positioning himself in a way that subtly blocked Keanu from getting any closer to the car. "And you do realize," Henry continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge, "this car costs more than some homes in Beverly Hills, right? It's not something just anyone can take home." He let the words settle, waiting to see if they would shake Keanu's confidence. Keanu frowned slightly but kept his tone measured, polite, unwavering. "I'm aware. That's why I'm here. I'm interested. Could you tell me more about it?" His insistence was steady, his patience intact, but wearing thin. Henry let out a dry, humorless laugh, the kind that dripped with disdain. Crossing his arms again, he leaned slightly forward, his voice turning cold. "Look, I don't know how to put this more simply, but cars like this attract a certain kind of clientele. People who understand what they're buying." He let his eyes drift down Keanu's outfit once more, then smirked. "And with all due respect, you don't exactly seem to fit the profile." Keanu took a slow, deep breath, controlling the surge of discomfort turning into quiet indignation. He tilted his head slightly, as though trying to confirm he had heard correctly. "Profile," he repeated neutrally. Henry's smirk widened. "Yes, profile," he emphasized. "Our cars aren't just vehicles. They're symbols of status, success, exclusivity. Things that, sorry to say, don't seem to align much with, well, this..." He made a theatrical gesture toward Keanu's clothes, his casual demeanor. The silence that followed was deafening. A few employees stopped what they were doing, their curiosity now outweighing their professionalism. Others pretended not to listen, but their stolen glances said otherwise. Keanu didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared at Henry for a long moment, measuring his words carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice remained calm, but edged with something sharper, something undeniable. "Curious," he said, "how you seem to know so much about people just by what they wear. That says more about you than it does about me." Henry's expression darkened, his smirk faltering. He stepped closer, now invading Keanu's personal space, his voice lowering but still dripping with arrogance. "Listen here, buddy," he sneered. "I see people like you all the time. They come in, look at the cars, dream a little, then leave without spending a dime. If you're here to play pretend, I'll ask you not to waste any more of my time or my team's time." Keanu still didn't move, but his posture shifted. The patience he had displayed was still there, but now beneath it was a silent, unmistakable resolve. "And what if I'm not here to dream?" Keanu asked simply. Henry let out a short, incredulous laugh, shaking his head as though the idea was absurd. Then I'd say you're in the wrong place, he said, his words sharp as glass. Because this place is for people who can pay. People who have something to prove. And honestly, you don't look like you have either. The air around them grew heavier, almost suffocating. The quiet murmurs from the employees and customers were now a low, buzzing tension. Keanu looked at Henry for a few more seconds. His discomfort now transformed into something deeper, something closer to quiet, restrained indignation. He gave a slight smile, not one of joy, but one of understanding. Funny, he said, his voice still calm but cutting. I always thought the real luxury was treating people with respect. Maybe you should think about that. Henry's face hardened, his jaw tightening as his frustration became visible. His need to assert dominance, to win this exchange, burned in his eyes. People like you only come here to waste everyone's time. He spat, his voice dripping with sarcasm. This isn't a stroll through the park, and it's definitely not a place for dreamers with worn jackets and empty pockets. Keanu tilted his head slightly, studying the man in front of him. He took another deep breath, carefully choosing his next words. Funny, he mused, how you talk about wasting time when you're so busy judging others by what they wear instead of who they are. Maybe you should think about what really matters. Henry's eyes narrowed, his face flushed with frustration. He stepped forward once more, lowering his voice but keeping the venom in his tone. Oh, I know exactly what matters, he hissed. And it's certainly not moral lessons from someone who thinks they have the right to walk in here like they belong. Keanu's expression didn't change, but something inside the showroom did. The tension had reached a breaking point. Employees held their breath. Customers exchanged glances, and the air in that gleaming, luxurious dealership suddenly felt suffocating. You don't know who you're dealing with. Henry's voice dripped with arrogance, his expression hardening as he stared Keanu down. But Keanu didn't flinch. His posture remained firm, his gaze locked on Henry's, unwavering. That silent composure only made the manager's frustration burn hotter, pushing him closer to the edge. The air in the dealership felt thick, electric, as if something was about to break. Realizing that his words had no effect, Henry let his emotions take control. You don't tell me what to do, he shouted, his face red with rage. In a reckless, impulsive move, he raised his fist, whether to intimidate Keanu or strike him outright. The room collectively gasped, shock rippling through the air. But Keanu reacted instantly, moving with the reflexes of someone who had faced far greater challenges than this. With a swift, fluid motion, he caught Henry's fist midair, gripping it firmly but without aggression. It wasn't an act of violence, it was control, restraint. Time seemed to freeze, every person in the showroom holding their breath. Henry stood there, his face frozen in disbelief, realizing just how easily Keanu had stopped him. He had lost. Not just physically, but in a battle of character and dignity. All eyes were now on Keanu, the once buzzing showroom now eerily silent. In that moment, Keanu's presence was more commanding than ever before. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low, steady, but filled with quiet strength. The anger you're feeling has nothing to do with me, he said, his words cutting through the tension. Maybe it's time to look inward and deal with that before you take it out on others. His grip loosened, and he released Henry's hand just as effortlessly as he had caught it. Henry staggered back, shaken and humiliated, though he desperately tried to mask it with a rigid posture. He straightened his suit jacket, but his hands trembled slightly, his body betraying the reality of his emotions. Keanu adjusted his worn leather jacket, his movement effortless, as if none of this had ever affected him. Then, with a final glance at Henry, he spoke one last time. Respect doesn't cost a thing, Keanu said, his voice carrying a weight heavier than any luxury car in that showroom. But for some people, it seems harder to find than anything in this place. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked toward the exit. The only sound in the entire dealership was the firm, deliberate echo of his footsteps against the polished floor. The room remained frozen, as if no one dared to break the silence. Customers and employees exchanged uneasy glances, still processing what they had just witnessed. Some still held their breath, as if waiting for something else to happen. But then Keanu noticed something. In the far corner of the dealership, a young man stood with his phone raised, screen still recording. He had captured everything: the dismissive attitude, the insults, the attempt at intimidation. Every second of the exchange had been documented. Keanu turned slightly, locking eyes with the young man. For a moment, the man looked uncertain, as if unsure whether to lower his phone or keep filming. But then, a silent understanding passed between them. The young man gave Keanu a small nod, a gesture of quiet solidarity. Keanu responded with a faint smile, subtle but meaningful. Then, without another word, he stepped through the glass doors, disappearing into the Los Angeles sunlight. Inside, Henry stood frozen, his humiliation now complete, but the consequences of his actions were only beginning to unfold. The video wouldn't stay hidden for long. And when the world saw what had happened, the fallout would be devastating. By the next morning, the video had already gone viral. The young man had uploaded it overnight, and within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. Outrage spread like wildfire, people furious over how Keanu had been treated. The contrast was striking, a man known for his humility being humiliated by someone so arrogant. How can anyone treat Keanu Reeves like this? One commenter wrote, "He's literally one of the kindest men in Hollywood." Another user tweeted, "That manager is an absolute disgrace. This is why people hate elitists." The reaction was relentless, merciless, and unstoppable. The clip spread across major news outlets, headlines exploding across entertainment blogs. "Manager disrespects Keanu Reeves, instantly regrets it." Read 1. Keanu's powerful words on respect go viral after shocking confrontation. The video was everywhere, replayed millions of times. The public backlash was immediate and fierce. The dealership's social media pages were flooded with angry comments demanding an explanation. "Boycott this place," people declared. "No one should be treated like this, especially not Keanu." Henry, now desperate to contain the damage, issued a public statement. "This was a misunderstanding. I didn't immediately recognize Mr. Reeves and my behavior was misinterpreted." But no one believed him. The damage had been done. Former employees began speaking anonymously to the press, revealing that Henry's toxic behavior was nothing new. "He's always treated people like that," one revealed. Didn't matter if they were rich or not, he thought he was better than everyone. The scandal intensified, and soon, the dealership began hemorrhaging customers. While the world buzzed with anger, Keanu remained silent. He had never been one to seek revenge or attention, but he knew this wasn't just about him. This was about how people are treated based on appearances, status, and assumptions, and he wasn't going to let it end as just another scandal. One evening, he turned to a close friend. "The video is out there. People are reacting," Keanu said, his voice calm. "But I don't want this to be just a story people forget. I want to do something that inspires change." His friend raised an eyebrow. "And what are you going to do?" he asked. Keanu took a slow sip of coffee, his expression unreadable. Then finally he gave a faint, knowing smile. "Handle it my way." And with that, Keanu made a decision. He would return to that dealership. Not for revenge, but to teach a lesson the world would never forget. After hanging up the phone, Keanu sat in silence, his thoughts drifting back to the car. He still wanted it. But now, it had become more than just a vehicle, it had become a symbol. A symbol of the way people judge others based on appearances. A symbol of how one moment can expose deep-rooted arrogance and entitlement. "I need to go back," he thought, exhaling deeply. The question that lingered in the air was not whether he should return, but what he would do when he did. This wasn't about revenge, and it certainly wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about something bigger. Days passed, but the storm surrounding the video did not fade. If anything, it only grew stronger. Social media remained flooded with outrage, with people across the world condemning the dealership's behavior. Entertainment blogs, news anchors, and even industry professionals weighed in on the viral scandal. And yet, as always, Keanu stayed out of the spotlight. He refused to make a public statement, choosing instead to let the world draw its own conclusions. But deep down, he knew that the story couldn't just end here, not without a meaningful resolution. He had always believed that action spoke louder than words, and this time would be no different. So one quiet afternoon, he made his decision. Keanu walked into the same dealership, his presence as calm and unshakable as ever. There was no fanfare, no security, no cameras, no media circus following his every move. But the moment he stepped through those glass doors, the change was immediate and undeniable. Every single employee froze in place, their faces betraying a mix of nervousness and shame. Some staff members lowered their heads, avoiding his gaze. Others stood completely still, as if waiting for the inevitable reckoning. The once bustling showroom, always filled with high-end clientele and luxury deals, now felt eerily empty. The boycott, fueled by public outrage, had taken a devastating toll. And there, behind the marble counter, stood Henry. The same man who had mocked him, judged him, and nearly attacked him, but this time, his once confident posture had vanished. His face was pale, his body tense, his eyes filled with something he rarely displayed before: fear. When Keanu's eyes met his, Henry visibly swallowed, his throat tightening. For the first time, the manager seemed smaller, almost defeated before he even spoke. Taking a tentative step forward, he forced himself to muster the courage to speak, though his voice was low and restrained. "Mr. Reeves," he began, his words careful, calculated. "I want to apologize for what happened." Keanu said nothing, his expression unreadable. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." Henry continued, shifting uncomfortably. "I hope we can start over. Perhaps I could show you the car that caught your eye?" Slowly, Keanu turned toward him, his gaze steady, piercing. Henry's breath hitched, and he couldn't hold the eye contact for long, his own guilt too heavy. "Start over," Keanu repeated, his voice smooth but firm. "I'm not sure you understand." The tension in the room was palpable, every employee and customer watching in complete silence. "The problem here isn't just how you treated me," Keanu said, his tone carrying a quiet authority. "It's how you treat people. Any person." Henry opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Keanu took a slow step back, his gaze still locked onto the manager. "Respect isn't something you bargain with," he continued, his words echoing across the room. "It's not something you reserve only for those you deem worthy." Henry stiffened, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. But this time he didn't argue, he knew he had already lost. Keanu exhaled lightly, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Either you have respect, or you don't," he said, finality lacing his words. Henry tried to salvage the situation, his voice now almost pleading. "Mr. Reeves, please, I made a mistake. Let me make it right." But Keanu shook his head slowly, a sad, knowing smile crossing his face. "I came here looking for something special," he said. For a brief moment, Henry thought there was hope, something that had meaning to me. Keanu continued. "But what I found was something that can't be fixed with an apology." The words hit Henry like a crushing weight, his shoulders sagging in defeat. Keanu took one last look at the car, running his hand across its surface. Then, with quiet conviction, he delivered the final blow. "That's why I won't be buying this car. Not from this dealership." The weight of his words crushed whatever dignity Henry had left. Around them, employees and customers alike remained frozen, absorbing the gravity of the moment. Keanu turned toward the exit, but just before stepping through the doors, he glanced back one final time. "I hope this serves as a lesson not just for you, but for everyone here," he said. "True luxury isn't a car or a price tag." His voice remained steady, unwavering. True luxury is treating people with dignity. And that, unfortunately, seems rarer than any model you have in this showroom. And with that, he walked out, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt inescapable. Days after the incident, the video continued to spread, but the narrative had shifted. People weren't just talking about the confrontation anymore, they were talking about the lesson Keanu had turned it into. Once again, he had become a symbol of humility, integrity, and quiet strength. Rather than supporting a dealership built on arrogance, Keanu found a different place. A modest dealership, owned by a middle-aged man named Sam, who had built his business on one simple principle: respect. When Keanu walked into the shop, he was greeted with a genuine smile, not suspicion. "Welcome," Sam said warmly. "How can I help you today?" Keanu smiled, feeling something he hadn't felt in the previous dealership: genuine hospitality. "I'm looking for something special," he said. By the end of the day, he had found the car he was looking for. But it wasn't just about the vehicle anymore, it was about choosing to support a business that valued people over profit. He took a photo with Sam and his team, posting it with a simple yet powerful caption. "True luxury is being treated with respect. Thank you for reminding me of that." The post went viral, sparking a global conversation about respect and inclusivity. People began sharing stories of discrimination and resilience, pushing for better treatment in businesses everywhere. Even luxury brands took notice, reevaluating how they treated their customers. And as for the original dealership, the fallout was unavoidable. Henry was fired, the business struggled, and it became a cautionary tale in the industry. But Keanu's lesson endured, proving once again that dignity, respect, and kindness will always be worth more than wealth and status. Keanu Reeves' story is more than just an incident at a luxury car dealership. It serves as a mirror reflecting society where too many people are judged by their appearance rather than their true character. It reminds us that arrogance, prejudice, and false pride do not elevate us, they blind us and ultimately lead to our downfall. Keanu had every opportunity to turn this into a scandal, to escalate the situation. But instead, He chose a quiet yet powerful way to teach the world a lesson. Respect is not something to be bargained for. Either you have it, or you have nothing at all. He didn't need to argue, nor did he need to retaliate with anger. His calm composure and unwavering integrity did more damage to arrogance than any words ever could, transforming a negative experience into an inspiring lesson for millions. Perhaps the most thought-provoking part of this story is not the downfall of the arrogant manager, but the fact that Keanu Reeves was never shaken by the insult. He understood that his true value wasn't in the clothes he wore, nor in what others thought of him. It was in who he was as a person. And that is the lesson for all of us. Never let others define you based on appearances. Live in a way that makes your character unforgettable. In a world that is becoming increasingly materialistic, where wealth is often used as a measure of a person's worth, this story serves as a reminder that respect, kindness, and integrity are still the most valuable qualities. It's easy to judge others by what they wear, but only those with true depth can see a person's real worth. And that is why Keanu Reeves is not just a great actor, he is a truly admirable human being.